as an example, Port Colborne has a stormwater retention tank that is, I believe, 8 million liters in its size. It's huge, and it looks like a large Olympic-sized swimming pool that's probably 3 times the depth of the swimming pool. And in a storm event, it will fill and prevent that water from going into the natural environment. And the operators will then pump from that at a fixed rate over the next couple of weeks after the storm event to pump it down, but run all of the liquid and the contents through the treatment process, thereby mitigating any impact of the storm on the natural environment. And that's done all the time. So the spent water gets collected and out of the municipality from the various sources. And there are laws in place in Ontario now to prevent discharger abuses, so that companies that use the sewers, for instance, don't discharge excessive amounts of fats and greases in the case of restaurants, or don't get a chance to discharge high temperature water that would otherwise inactivate or kill off the good bacteria that we require to do the treatment of the waste in a waste treatment plant. Likewise, there are chemical limits so that the same thing doesn't happen with extensive chemicals being thrown into the system. And the professional operator takes care of all of this simultaneously, while trying to maintain the minimum velocity in the wastewater collection system that we know will deliver the wastewater to the treatment facility in a good state to treat, that does not cause a problem or produce noxious odors. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So finally, you get to the fourth pillar of this, or the fourth class of treatment operator, and that's the person or the individuals that run the wastewater treatment facilities. Like the water treatment facilities, except they have one extra component. Water treatment is largely physical and chemical. Wastewater treatment adds the biological component, which is really quite interesting, because that effectively is duplicating what nature does by concentrating the natural process into tanks and equipment that occupy a much smaller footprint. So everybody's probably familiar with a lagoon system for treating waste on a small scale, and there are several in the Niagara region. But if you applied the lagoon principle to Toronto, for example, the size of the lagoon would be Lake Ontario. And so that's just not feasible. So what we have are mechanical plants, and the mechanical plants are very complex and take a great set of skills to run them. Mechanical plants for wastewater have several degrees of treatment depending on what you're trying to achieve or what the requirements are of the receiving stream. When you go into a large body of water, you don't need to treat as much of the load, because the natural systems in the lake or river can absorb some component of that. But if you're going to discharge into a very small brook, then the degree of treatment has to be extremely high. And there are places in Niagara that do both, where there's a high degree of treatment and where there's a lesser degree of treatment, and it just depends on where the discharge is. In Grimsby, for instance, the discharge is half a mile out into Lake Ontario, and therefore the requirements are nearly as stringent as they would be for the discharge requirements into the Welland River, for instance, that are on the city of Welland. The other thing that they have to do is they have to scale the process for the volumes treated. And that's usually done in collaboration with engineering companies, but the engineering companies need decent data on which to base their estimations. Otherwise, there's a huge loss and a disconnect in the money expended for the results achieved. And operators are key in making sure that the money doesn't get wasted in areas that really don't need attention. The last thing is that these processes are now becoming more desirable to look at the total reuse and recovery of the resources that are there. The water resource has always been something that we've recovered, but now we're looking at heat recovery, and we're looking at using the falling water energy to produce power, as well as more stringent use of the biosolids to achieve nitrogen inputs for farm cropping and agricultural reuse. So those are becoming very prevalent as resources get tighter and energy gets more expensive. Next slide. Okay, so how do you go about starting a career as a professional operator? Well, it's really simple. You can access resources, and I have that on a subsequent slide, but really what I want to point out is that you end up, as a professional operator, you end up preventing more deaths in your community than doctors do in their entire career. And that's because you're responsible for everybody in the community and their health, and the maintenance of public health as far as water potability goes, and the prevention of disease spread, because you've stopped that in check when you've treated the wastewater. You get to use all of the latest high-tech stuff, which is really fun. The work makes a visible difference on a daily basis, which is very satisfying for the people who are doing the work. I've heard this time again from thousands of students who say they love the business because they don't do the same thing every day, but they see the difference every day of the work they do. So that keeps them mentally stimulated, and it's very gratifying. And I think for a lot of people, when you ask them about the quality of their work, many people will gripe about the fact that, well, it's a job, I go to it and I do it because it puts money in my pocket and food on my table, but I'd really rather do something different. I don't know too many people who have ever chosen the professional operations as a career who said, I'd rather be doing something different. They all love the work they've done. And so for me as the instructor who trains these people, it's doubly gratifying to see them achieve lifelong careers and retire. And, I've even had people phone me after they've finished their career and say, this is my last day, and I want to thank you for turning me on to this. It's been a great run, and, wish me the best, etc., and go on to their retirement, which is kind of an interesting thing. Next slide. So how do you get started? Well, it's really simple. You can start as a high school graduate. You do need a valid driver's license without any strikes against you, because you're going to be handling vehicles and equipment that need to be driven down the road, but nobody wants somebody that's got a history of irresponsibility. You've got to be able to sign up for the lifelong learning aspect, and you've got to be able to think about learning differently than what you did in school. So there's a lot of on-the-job training that's available. There's after-hour study that has to be done, and there's a lot of hands-on activities that have to be learned. And these are skills that are passed down one to another from people that are doing the work presently to people who are coming into the business. And that alone requires the ability or the necessity for an individual to have good interpersonal skills, but also good intergenerational skills, because you're not working with people all of the same age. You've got a very large range of people, and the older people do have the knowledge and do have the inside scoop on how things work, or more importantly, how they don't work. And that can save a newcomer a lot of time and grief getting up to speed very quickly. And you need to be, in this business, somewhat self-disciplined to do the study, motivated to do it, and the motivation usually comes with, well, you'll stay employed if you get licensed. And of course, to do some of the tasks, you need to be physically fit. Okay, next slide, please. Where do you get this information? Well, these are the four best links I've got. The two top links relate to the water side and the wastewater side, and they have American in their name, but they really are international organizations dedicated to the advancement of people in the professional operations careers. In Ontario, the whole certification thing is handled by the Ministry of the Environment and Energy. So you want to go and check out their website. And for anybody who's interested in attaining the professional accreditation, the last link is to the Water Professionals International through the Professional Operator Organization.org. And they're closely related to the certification program that's run in every state and province in North America and throughout some of the other countries in the English-speaking world. So the good part about that is you can take your accreditation and you literally can work in any other part of the planet. When I was starting off, I had operational opportunities to go and work in Bermuda, in the Caribbean, and in Africa. And I chose to do something in Florida, North America, but I didn't get the offshore experience, but it was certainly available, still is today. This is a good career choice for somebody who has ADD, because you're not required to sit in a chair and watch a screen all day. You are required to get up and move around and go and solve problems and bring solutions to the workplace along with the other people who are doing the same kind of work. So it's a good career choice for people who fit into the description I've given. It's not for everyone, and it's a good thing it's not for everyone. Then I think the most fun part of it for me is that in my career, I've probably trained somewhat close to 35,000 people. I've been doing this since 1979, and I can tell you that when you get the third generation of operator in a family coming to you, and you were the one who trained their grandfather, then their father, and then the daughter of that father shows up and says, "My grandfather says I should give you a hug and thank you. It's because you've been able to help my family achieve their financial dreams and goals, and it's made a good life for the grandchild to actually grow up in a house that had a whole bunch of people that understood why she wanted to go into operation." It's gratifying. So there you go. That's pretty much my sales pitch on why this should be a career choice for individuals. Thanks.